Hi everyone, welcome back to Great Northern Cascade Division in N-Scale. My name's Ian, and if you're somewhat new to the channel, or even if you've been a subscriber for a while, you might be wondering where I am. It looks a little bit different backdrop behind me. I have moved to the south side of the layout now, so most of the activity that you've seen has been on this side of the layout. That's where the Seattle stations are, that's where the turnaround loop is, that's where most of the work has been going on. But there is also this entire other side, the south side of the layout. So the entire upper deck now on this south side has the skyboards in place. They've been patched, they've been painted. The valance fascia up for the lighting deck is also in place as well. Now I didn't do any videos, I went through this. It's the exact same process that I did when I did the north side of the layout, so I'll put a link to the video for that up here somewhere probably. Basically it's 1/8 inch tempered hardboard for both the skyboard and for that valance slash fascia. Different materials that you can use. I find that 1/8 inch tempered hardboard works pretty well. It's a fairly common way to do it. It's pretty easy to cut, comes in 8 by 4 foot sheets, and so I get it ripped into 3 different sections at Home Depot, and then I just do a very little trim, shave some off on the table saw at home. The deck here was specifically set to right around 16 inches, so I have them do a rough cut at the hardware store, and then I just trim it up a little bit on the table saw here, and it works out great. Comes in big 8-foot sections. The middle section here of the layout was basically just a 2 by 4 foot stud wall, so that just gets nail gunned straight onto that. I had extra supports within there, so there's nothing else that needs to get done. And then all the wall sections here, like along this side and kind of on the back here, I do strips about 2 or 3 inch wide of plywood that I've got left over from doing some of the actual framework. So it's something like 15, 32 inch plywood, depending on what I have. And all I want to do is just raise it off the wall a little bit so that when it kind of goes around on the actual lighting valance, it's not pressed flush against the wall. Kind of brings it out just a little bit. So strips go along the wall, basically on top of the studs, and then that 1/8 inch tempered hardboard for the skyboard then rests on top of that. Again, different materials that you could use, different ways that you could do this. Some people I've seen use 1/4 inch material. I've seen some people go all the way down to 1/16 inch acrylic sheeting, that kind of stuff, vinyl sheeting, and then they'll paint it and then they'll put it on. Again, a bunch of different ways that you can do it. I'm sure that when I move to the second level and then the lower level, if I have a different material that I have on hand that I can get for cheaper or it's easier, then maybe I'll go with that. But at least this upper deck now, I've got all of the skyboards done, all of the lighting valance done. Really does make a big difference. And so now I can start work on some more of this upper deck. So I've pretty much got the track plan for Interbay Yard about 80% done, something like that. And then start to figure out some stuff down for the Salmon Bay Bridge, and then coming up on this side as you will be coming up along the Pugent Sound, coming into Everett, and then moving over towards Snohomish. So let's go for a little bit of a walk around with the camera just so we can have a little bit more look at some of these skyboards and valance and start to talk through some of the ideas that I've got for now starting to get track work down here on this south side of the upper deck of the layout. All right, so just to help orient people, this is what I refer to as the north side of the layout. This is probably what you're being kind of used to seeing. So we've got a King Street station, Union Station. We'll come back to some of the new cars that are in the stations. The station area is here coming around into the return loop. That's the return loop, the reversing module, and then coming back in. And so this is where pretty much all of the activity that you've seen on the channel for the last number of months has been going on. If you've seen the 1 year recap, or if you have been around for a while and you've seen some of the construction stuff when I was doing lighting, this center wall is really just to kind of give a little bit of a scenic break. There's really nothing special about the 2 different sides of the layout other than we've got this long center wall. And this long center wall is 24 feet. Round towards the end, and then the back framework is about 1.5 feet deep, I think. So we got 25.5 feet, and then this brings it out another 2.5 feet, something like that. So north side of the layout over here, and again it's all one continuous, will be all one continuous layout, and then the south side of the layout over here is what I've been working on. So slow going. The kids have been back at school for the last 2 or 3 weeks, which means they've also had after school activities and all that kind of fun stuff. There's also an awful lot of skyboards. Like I said, this is 24 feet. That's an 8-foot section that curves. We'll have a look. And then this long back wall here is 32 feet. So someone check my math and you're at 65 feet of skyboards and valance, plus kind of doing the turnaround on the end there. So slow going to get all of this put up and patched, and a couple of coats of paint on everything. So same as I did on the north side, both the skyboard and the valance fascia kind of curves around. It's not a sharp corner, curves around, and it's, oh goodness, 28-inch radius, 26-inch radius, something like that. Enough that, kind of like we had on the north side of the layout, any track that comes in here is going to end up being about a 24-inch radius. Nice broad curves, even in HL would be nice broad curves, let alone in N scale. Same thing, you took up some of the wiring there, but again, curved both for the skyboard and on the lighting valance, and then come all the way down that big long 32-foot section to come all the way down to the end. So deep breath, like I said, a lot of work, slow work, not hard work, just slow work to get everything done, patch everything. So let's talk a little bit about what's going to be coming in here. This is going to be Interbay, and so we come over onto this side a little bit. We got King Street Station, Union Station. I'm going to say that they come together here again. Remember, as we go through this, this is not necessarily prototypical layout that's authentically following the prototype. I always call this a freelance layout. You could call it, maybe call it freelance prototype, freelance proto, freelance prototypical, whatever. It's a freelance layout based on the prototype, and that I'm heavily basing it on how things would look, how things would operate or would have operated. But I'm also then throwing in a little bit of modeler's discretion, and also then having to make some compromises just because of the space that you always have. Even in a big layout like this, there's always compromises on space. So I'm saying that Union Station comes through, and we have these two tracks, and right around here is where you would come into the tunnel. Further down, a few inches further down, somewhere around here, you're going to come into a tunnel that will then start taking you into downtown Seattle. My original plan was that downtown Seattle was going to kind of move most of the way around, and I'm going to have to condense that a little bit, which is okay. And it's really, again, compromises on space. I wanted to have a nice roundhouse in here, probably 12, 15 stall roundhouse for Interbay Yard. Now again, not 100% faithful to the prototype, because in Interbay Yard itself, the roundhouse was on the north side, which would be all the way down there. This would technically be the south side of Interbay, and downtown Seattle, somewhere around here. And I just, again, because of space, I'm actually going to put the roundhouse in here, because I don't want it kind of compromising the scene that I would have for Salmon Bay Bridge at the far side, which we'll get to in a minute. So roundhouse is going to come in here, 130-foot Walthers motorized turntable, 12 or 15 stall roundhouse. And so I always kind of figured that I would have to bring this out. It only needs to come out about 6 inches. But once I've kind of planned out and figured out the track work, I wanted to give myself a little bit more room. I didn't want it to get too cramped in here, although I think I could get the 130-foot scale turntable and 15 stall roundhouse in here and still have the 2 man lines that will curve around the front of it. I don't want it to get too tight, so I'm going to extend this by about 6 inches, if that, and then we'll have the man lines come around the edge of that, plenty of room inside. And so what I'm thinking is there'll be a little bit of a hill behind the roundhouse, and then more on that side you'd have some of the buildings representing downtown Seattle. It's really just so that you have a scenic break, so that you come out the stations, you would see the trains going under downtown Seattle. The trains are kind of out of view as you then step around, and as that kind of hill falls down, okay, now I'm into Interbay. Now I've got the roundhouse. Now my trains come out of the tunnel and pass in front of the roundhouse, 2 man lines that will run all the way down the front of the layout here. all the way down to the far end where we're going to get into Salmon Bay Bridge, which we'll get to in a minute. But turntable and the Roundhouse itself, there'll then be some amount of refueling, sanding, watering facilities in between the main line and the line that runs out of the turntable. One, if not two, of the Walthers diesel maintenance facilities go in there just to kind of extend it and make it a little bit longer. The machine shop and back shop attached to the Roundhouse as well. And then I've got two of the Walthers car shops that will come in here as well. And for the actual yard itself, again, somewhat compromising on space, and because the goal of this whole layout is really to be running long passenger trains and then to be running some freight trains as well, just to serve some industries that I'm going to have around. But yard switching is not my main interest. It is not my main focus of building the layout. It is not my main intent if I would then be having operating sessions even. And operating sessions here, what there may be, are unlikely to be 8, 10, 12 people, and so I need to have a whole bunch of freight operations going on, but I do need to have freight yards. So I'm going to have probably 7 or 8 lines in the yard. 3 of those would be for receiving, 3 of those would be for departure, eastbound, westbound, however you want to call it. There'd then be yard leads, obviously, to be able to move the locos around from that. There will then be some runarounds in there, and then probably one line that runs right the way through the middle that could then be used either for arrival, departures, maybe as a train pulls in, then you split it from that. I somewhat understand operationally how it would work in a real session, but again, I'm a little space constrained in that intentionally these are only 18-inch deep decks because need to leave site clearance for the second level, and then the second level bumps out of the third level that comes further out. Again, more videos I have on why the bench work is different depths, especially once you come over on this other side where it's quite clearly step different depths. It's all for sight lines to make sure that I don't obstruct too much on the lower levels. So that's why I've that's why I only have 18 inches on this top deck where the yard's going to be. But if we think over on the other side where we have the stations, there are 7 lines that come through on a 16-inch wide base, and each of those tracks I think is about 2 inches, maybe a little over 2 inches center to center on the tracks, because there'll be a platform that runs through them. So over here we don't have to worry about running the platforms through. 2 main lines that will run probably a couple of inches set back from here, and then there's still plenty of room for 7 or 8 lines to come in with all the turnouts. So most of the facilities and buildings are going to be on that side, and again, part of wanting to have most of that stuff down there is that the operator would be around about here if they were moving locos in and out from those various different facilities. Eventually, Spokane Station is over here, so anyone who's operating Spokane Station is over here. Okay, well, they're out of the way, they're not back to back with people. Anyone who's doing some stuff in what I'm calling Hill Yard, but it's really not Hill Yard, it's nowhere near big enough. Hill Yard is going to be over here, so they're out the way of the people that are running Spokane. So again, this is all somewhat logically thought through, but I want the people down there for Interbay Yard, because down on the bottom, Wenatchee Yard is going to come in here. And Wenatchee Yard, I have a little bit more depth, so I have a little bit more space. You might hear some noise upstairs because the family's just come back home. I've been getting this done while they were out the way. So most of the land's going to come through, but most of the actual facilities will be down there. But then there's lots of space down here if people are switching cars, moving cars around. And then all the lines will start to come back together, and then we'll have 2 main lines that will then sweep around here into Salmon Bay Bridge area. Salmon Bay Bridge, kind of talked about before, has one of the bascule bridges, actually has 2 of them, one of which raises up. Now, Walthers do make a motorized version of it in HO. They don't make one in N, but I'm looking at either kit bashing one in N, or a friend of mine out in Seattle, Keith Lyons, has noted that there is someone else in the Seattle area that looked like they scratch built one out of brass maybe, so I might pick their brains on how they did that. And it is motorized as well, so I would love to see a little bit more on that. But I want this to be a scenic thing. I want you to be done with the yard. I want then a scenic break over Salmon Bay Bridge so that you can run along the Pugent Sound here over on this side, and we've got very distinct different breaks. If we had tried to put the Roundhouse and the facilities over here, I feel like that impedes too much on the scenic stuff that I'm wanting to put in for Salmon Bay Bridge here. So that's why everything is shifted. All the facilities are on technically the south side of Interbay Yard, not the north side of Interbay Yard like they would be in the prototype. This is why I can call it a freelance layout rather than saying that it's a full true prototype layout. And then coming over here, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but this is where we'll come over Salmon Bay Bridge, run along the Pugent Sound, a little bit of mental gymnastics, kind of like we had on the north side of the layout. What will end up being here is you are essentially standing in the water. You're looking across the water from the sound onto the land itself, where the trains then have this very iconic shot where they run along the Pugent Sound. So the mental gymnastics is that theoretically, if you were in the water looking this way and seeing the trains, they're moving from north to south or south to north, depending on which direction they're going. It's actually flipped because of the perspective that I'm going to be doing here. You're watching the trains as if you were on a boat bobbing around in the Sound, and the trains are actually moving from south to north, or they're coming from north to south. So again, it's not true prototype, it's freelance based on the prototype. The mental gymnastics I'm fine with, and rule number one is that it's my layout. So we're getting way too far ahead of ourselves to then start talking about any actual industries in Everett and moving down into Snohomish before we hit the helix at the end of the bench work there. Interbay Yard is going to be the next step. I've already got all the plywood cut and ready to go. Same thing that I did on the far side. This will all be plywood raised up 2 inches, and then probably when we come down here we'll switch over to the pink foam to then do slightly easier smaller sections coming around there. All of this, I just want a nice flat base using this plywood. Makes it a lot easier for them to be able to drill down through that, to be able to do all the feeder wires for the track, and to be able to get point motors in, turn-up motors in, stuff like that. So, deep breath. I need to take a deep breath. I need to take a drink as well. This has been quite a bit of work, but overall very happy with how this turned out. Now this is the entire upper deck, all done in terms of lighting, in terms of the skyboards, the lighting valance, stuff like that. Happy with how this is finished up, happy with how this looks. Same as on the north side, it's a sky blue. Not convinced this is its final form. Still trying to figure out if I try and do some kind of photographic printed background, or if I try and do some kind of hand painted background, but at least for now sky blue works pretty good. And so the next little series that I'm going to be starting on is getting into Interbay Yard itself. I haven't forgotten about the Seattle stations. There was like a 4-part series on that. You know, in my younger days, I would have continued to plow on probes with Seattle Station, and I would have tried to do the platforms, and I would have tried to get ballast down and all kinds of stuff like that. But it's just like, no, it's functional. Peeling back the curtains a bit doesn't look great maybe right now, but that's just how it is. That's just the way things go. So I'm going to leave that as it is. I will come back to the stations, but there'll be probably, you know, an upcoming 3-4 part series I'm doing Interbay Yard, and then that'll probably stop as we move on to other things, and we'll come back to it. But have you been enjoying this one? Let me know what you think about, you know, some of the rough ideas here for Interbay Yard. Yeah, I think that will work out pretty good with the track plan that I have. Rich is coming out at the start of November, so 6 weeks, 7 weeks, something like that. He's going to be here for about 10 days. Put him to work. I'm not going to have him just sitting around. So hopefully we can get a bunch of work done. So I'm wanting to at least get all this bed, the sub-row bed in place for Interbay Yard, get that track plan finalized, and maybe start to figure out some of the stuff down Salmon Bay Bridge. And then when he's here, we can get hopefully a good chunk of the yard done, and maybe even be able to make our way down here to the point of being able to get into this helix or up us down. onto that second level. So please do like, subscribe, follow along if you want to see some more progress as we start to get into Interbay Yard. I'm very excited to be on the south side of the layout now, because I spend so much time over on the north side, and now it really is all starting to come together now that it actually looks finished over here and ready to actually start putting down tracks. So I'll be back again soon. I'll look forward to talking more. All right, take care. Bye-bye.